The colossal Galactic Coliseum rose against the vacuum of space, resembling a massive diadem, its gleaming beacons casting elongated shadows over the assemblage of spacecraft encircling it. Within, the overwhelming cheers of spectators from countless species reverberated across the vast hall, the atmosphere dense with excitement, expectancy, and the sharp scent of exotic pheromones. Among the competitors, Ryu Kuroda advanced, his matte black armor undulating like a dark fluid. His presence starkly contrasted with the enormous, bizarre shapes of his fellow combatants. The soft glow of the arena lights danced off the complex motifs engraved on his combat suit, a fusion of traditional Japanese craftsmanship and modern human innovation. As he awaited the gate's ascent in the entrance corridor, the audience's murmurs were far from admiring. "Is this the finest warrior Earth has to offer?" an insect-like announcer questioned, its amplified tone resonating throughout the Colosseum. "Merely another delicate primitive, clinging to obsolete customs," it jibed, the audience's laughter melding into a harsh, discordant sound. Weapons clanged in the background as Ryu stood still, his visage hidden by a sleek mask, its sharp design masking any emotion. Underneath, his heart rate was calm, his breathing steady, results of years of rigorous training. He had been labeled many things, relic, phantom, outlier, yet now, more was at stake. This was not solely about his personal honor, it was about Earth's standing on the brink of insignificance in a universe that prized brute strength and genetic dominance. The gates creaked open, revealing the combat zone, a vast field of rugged terrain, mobile platforms, and gleaming energy barriers, all designed to test even the most versatile warriors. At the center, his adversary, an insect-like giant with segmented limbs and a chitinous shell shining like jet, regarded him indifferently. "First match, Earth against the Broth Horde," the announcer proclaimed, as the crowd's excitement surged, a mix of boos and eager shouts for violence filling the air. Ryu stepped onto the combat zone, each motion precise, aware of the disdain directed at him but dismissing it. His attention focused solely on the being before him. The broth giant emitted a deep, resonant hum, its forearms sparking to life with twin blades as the battle commenced. Ryu moved fluidly, his actions sparing yet effective, barely dodging a blade that whistled by his ear. Instead of flinching, he retaliated with a quick counter, a smoke grenade at his feet, enveloping the area in a dense fog, causing the broth to pause. Disappointed groans echoed from the crowd. "Is this all humanity has up its sleeve?" someone yelled, their voice carrying across the stadium. Inside the haze, Ryu was a phantom, his every sense sharpened, his movements silent across the uneven ground, while the broth flailed blindly. Then, like a wraith, he struck, a flash of steel severing one of the creature's bladed limbs, which clattered to the ground. The crowd gasped, the noise rippling through the air. The broth beast roared and turned to confront him, but Ryu had already vanished back into the mist. He repeated his tactics: strike, retreat, confuse, each attack aimed at vulnerabilities in the exoskeleton. With each successful hit, the jeers softened, turning into whispers of intrigue. In a decisive move, Ryu deployed a grappling line from his suit, propelling himself upwards. From a high vantage point, he watched the broth's erratic movements below, then leaped, striking precisely at the base of its neck. The creature fell, its limbs twitching in defeat. Silence fell for a moment, then the announcer, albeit hesitantly, declared, "Winner, Earth." The crowd's response was mixed, some booed, others clapped half-heartedly, a few leaned in, newly piqued by the unexpected outcome. Ryu rose from his crouch, dignified as the broth was removed from the field. He did not celebrate or acknowledge the crowd but turned and strode towards the gate, his demeanor as serene and controlled as upon his entry. In the shadows of the VIP section of the arena, a large reptilian figure leaned forward, its golden eyes narrowing as it watched Ryu vanish. Torek, the reigning champion of the Galactic Coliseum, emitted a low chuckle. "Interesting," he rumbled, his voice a deep vibration resonating in the air. "Maybe Earth isn't as weak as we assumed." The gates closed behind Ryu, leaving the audience buzzing with speculation. For the first time in decades, an Earthling had triumphed in the Galactic Coliseum, and for the first time, the galaxy's elite started to consider that perhaps there was more to humanity than they had previously believed. Ryu knelt in the dimly lit gladiator's prep room, the cold metallic surface pressing against his knees as he centered himself, the distant roar of the crowd still echoing, a reminder that his victory over the broth was seen as a mere fluke, an anomaly in a realm where raw strength ruled. They would soon learn otherwise. The next match arrived quickly. Ryu once again stood at the threshold of the Coliseum, the metal gates opening with a hydraulic hiss. The arena floor had transformed into a labyrinth of elevated platforms and pulsing energy fields, shifting unpredictably. His adversary awaited at the center, a Solari kinetic manipulator, tall and slender with violet skin that shimmered as though woven from light, tendrils of bioelectric energy dancing around its body. "Next battle, Earth versus the Solari Enlightened," the announcer's voice vibrated through the Coliseum. "Witness the clash of power against whatever this Terran thinks he's accomplishing," he mocked, eliciting a ripple of laughter from the audience. Ryu focused solely on the Solari, studying its stance, no weapons, no armor, yet its levitated posture spoke volumes about its mastery over its own body and the environment. The match began with a thunderous crack as a shock wave from the Solari hurled debris and electromagnetic bursts towards Ryu, who twisted, narrowly avoiding the surge that scorched the ground. Sparks flickered across his armor, the static buzzing in his ears. Ryu's mind processed the assault in fragments, pure force, directed by thought, clumsy at a distance but devastating up close. He advanced as the Solari lashed out with an invisible push. This time, Ryu didn't dodge. He shifted his center of gravity, letting the force glance off his side while a small metallic capsule fell from his sleeve, clinking to the ground between them and erupting in a flash of light, a magnesium flare. The blinding pulse disrupted the Solari's concentration, its energy tendrils flickering, leaving its defenses exposed. Ryu surged forward, closing the gap with inhuman speed, his strike precise, a nerve-point blow to the creature's side. But the Solari reacted faster than expected, a pulse of energy bursting from its chest and flinging Ryu backward into a wall. Pain rippled through his ribs, but he caught himself, landing on one knee. The crowd roared, finally seeing the Earthling punished. Ryu exhaled slowly. Pain is the body's way of speaking. Listen. Adapt. The Solari hovered closer, arrogance curling its lips. Another wave of kinetic force gathered around its hands. This time, Ryu didn't wait. He threw a handful of shuriken, not to strike but to embed them in the terrain around the alien. The Solari unleashed its blast. The energy struck the shuriken first, tiny coils within the throwing stars reacting, amplifying the electromagnetic burst in an erratic wave that rebounded back towards the Solari. The alien staggered, its own power betraying it. Ryu struck. He closed the distance, leaping onto the opponent's chest, and planted a small pressure device against its sternum. The moment he flipped backward to land, the device released a concussive burst. The Solari crumpled to the ground, unmoving. Silence gripped the arena for a heartbeat, then the announcer's voice cut through, hesitant but clear, "Winner, Earth." The crowd didn't laugh this time. There was confusion, murmurs of disbelief. Ryu didn't acknowledge them. He bowed slightly, an old gesture of respect, before exiting the arena without fanfare. Hours later, in the Gladiator's Lounge, Ryu sat alone, eyes closed, replaying the fight in his mind, every move, every mistake. Improvement was a path with no end. The door hissed open, and heavy footsteps echoed across the chamber. He didn't need to look to know who had arrived. Torek, the reptilian champion, loomed large, armored plates shifting over his scarred frame, the scent of scorched metal clinging to him, a living symbol of the arena's brutality. That was unexpected, Tor grumbled, his voice like grinding stone. You fight without augmentation, no cybernetics, no genetic superiority. His golden eyes narrowed. Yet you win. Ryu's gaze remained steady. Victory isn't defined by strength. It's defined by control. Torik's tongue flicked out, tasting the air in what Ryu suspected was mild amusement. You're an interesting human. But this arena demands more than clever tricks, it demands dominance. I don't need to dominate, Ryu replied evenly. I need to endure. A silence stretched between them, heavy but not hostile. Torik leaned closer. You fight well, Ryu Kuroda. But the crowd, they will only respect power they cannot deny. If you seek to change how they see your kind, you'll have to face me. Ryu's expression didn't shift, but deep within, a spark of challenge ignited. Then I will, he said simply. The champion gave a low growl of approval before turning away, his massive form disappearing into the shadows. Ryu exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in his muscles ease. The arena had tested his skill, but now it would test his resolve. And he would not break. The arena was different this time, gone were the shifting platforms and obscuring force fields. Now, a vast circular pit stretched before Ryu Kuroda, its floor scorched from countless battles, the scent of ionized steel thick in the air. Above, the crowd pressed closer than ever, restless, eager, predatory. They knew this match was different, no flukes, no excuses. This was a challenge, no restrictions, no mercy. Torik awaited him at the center. The reigning champion stood tall, his reptilian form coiled with layers of scar-hard muscle beneath segmented battle armor. His golden eyes glowed faintly, and in one clawed hand, he gripped a massive glaive, crackling with plasma energy. The weapon hummed, a predator's growl waiting to be unleashed. Earth's champion faces extinction, the announcer bellowed, his voice amplified until it shook the very walls. Gladiators, begin. Ryu drew no weapon, he had none. Instead, he bowed slowly, respectfully, then shifted into a low stance, his muscles loose but ready. The crowd cheered at his apparent foolishness. Torik wasted no time. The reptilian surged forward, the glaive arcing in a deadly blur. Ryu barely twisted aside, the blade missing by inches but searing heat licking his skin. Sparks exploded as the weapon bit into the ground, leaving a molten scar. No hesitation, Ryu struck, pivoting into Torik's exposed side, his palm driving into a pressure point along the champion's ribcage, a precise blow meant to disrupt breathing. Torik didn't flinch, the counter was brutal. His tail lashed out, slamming into Ryu's torso and hurling him backward. Pain exploded across his ribs as he hit the ground hard. He rolled with the impact, already rising, though his breath came sharp. Faster than expected, stronger than expected. Torik loomed, his voice rumbling with scorn. You should have stayed in the shadows, ninja. I am the arena's truth. You cannot win by dancing around me. The glaive spun again, a sweeping horizontal arc meant to cleave him in half. This time, Ryu didn't evade, he dropped low, his hand striking the ground, and launched himself upward, vaulting over the blade's path. Midair, he twisted, extending his leg in a sharp, powerful kick. His heel connected with the side of Torik's head, enough to snap it sideways, but not enough to stop him. Torik roared and seized Ryu mid-descent, claws closing around his arm like a vice. Pain lanced through his shoulder as the champion hurled him across the pit. He skidded, momentum rolling him to the arena's edge. The crowd was deafening now, chanting, mocking, "Earth falls, Earth falls." Ryu staggered to his feet, pain radiating from his ribs, his breathing ragged. Yet he centered himself, heartbeat slowing despite the agony. Torek advanced, glaive raised, confidence swelling. No more tricks. I end this now. Ryu exhaled, focusing. Center. Breathe. Control. The reptilian lunged. This time, Ryu moved not to evade but to close. He met Torek head-on, slipping beneath the glaive's deadly arc and driving his knee into the champion's side. Simultaneously, his hands struck, one clenching Torek's wrist, the other finding a gap beneath the armor plating, a precise nerve lock. For the first time, Torek faltered, his grip loosening on the glaive. But the champion's raw power was undeniable. He flexed, breaking Ryu's hold with sheer strength, and retaliated with a savage backhand. Ryu spun with the blow, minimizing the impact, but it still sent him reeling. Blood filled his mouth. I can't overpower him, but I can dismantle him. Ryu shifted tactics. When Torek advanced again, he dropped to a lower stance, drawing the champion's strikes downward, forcing heavier, slower swings. Each missed strike burned energy, each evasion chipped at his endurance. And then the moment came, Torek overextended, his glaive embedding itself in the stone floor for half a heartbeat too long. Ryu struck, a pressure capsule the size of a marble released from his sleeve and burst against Torek's face. A concentrated burst of ionized gas flared, blinding the champion just long enough for Ryu to vault onto his back. With surgical precision, Ryu drove a blade hidden along his forearm gauntlet deep into the back of Torek's neck, piercing the nerve cluster controlling his regenerative gland. The champion staggered, dropped to a knee. The crowd fell into a hushed disbelief. Torek's body trembled, struggling against the effects of the strike. Yet instead of rage, his voice rumbled low with something closer to respect. Clever human, his breathing slowed, the massive frame still but not lifeless, defeated yet alive. Ryu stepped back, chest heaving, yet not claiming victory with spectacle, no raised fists, no triumphant cry, only calm, practiced discipline. The announcer's voice broke the silence. Winner, Earth. A beat, then the crowd erupted, not with mockery but raw astonishment, a shift, not complete respect yet, but recognition. Ryu looked down at Torek, who met his gaze with a slow, deliberate nod. You have shown them more than strength, the champion rasped. You have shown will. Ryu offered a slight bow in return, but deep inside, he knew this battle was only the beginning. The arena's energy was different now, no longer hostile, no longer dismissive. Ryu Kuroda stood at the center of the vast coliseum. The heat of the lights pressing down as the crowd remained uncharacteristically silent. Billions across the galaxy watched this moment, every screen, every broadcast echoing with the same question: could the human truly have earned their respect? Torek, the once undisputed champion, stood at the edge of the pit. The wounds Ryu had inflicted were visible, though healing. His golden eyes, once gleaming with scorn, were now thoughtful, weighing something heavier than personal defeat. The reptilian raised his massive clawed hand and pointed at Ryu, his voice amplified across the entire arena. Before us stands a warrior who has defied every expectation, not through brute strength, not through genetic superiority, but through discipline, control. A murmur spread across the crowd, uncertainty, awe. Torek continued, his voice steady but heavy with significance. He has bested me not because he is stronger, but because he has mastered himself. And so, I yield my title. Gasps rippled outward. Ryu's head bowed slightly, but his focus remained sharp. He did not crave the title, that was not his purpose. He had come to prove something greater. The announcer, for once, seemed almost hesitant, his voice stripped of its usual mocking edge, rang out. Earth's champion declared victorious, new warlord of the arena. Silence hung thick in the air, only broken by the slow, rhythmic sound of someone clapping. A Carol observer, crystalline and ethereal, stood from the royal balcony. Their applause was joined by others, some hesitant, some sincere, but it was enough. A ripple became a wave. Ryu felt it, not as noise, but as a shift, respect earned. Yet beneath the triumph, tension remained. He could feel it lingering in the air, disbelief from some, silent challenges from others. The galaxy's respect was not given permanently, it was earned, battle by battle. Later, in the Hall of Champions, Ryu stood alone before a massive wall etched with names of past victors, ancient symbols from 100 worlds marking those who had proved themselves. His own name would be added soon, yet the weight in his chest felt heavier than triumph. Footsteps echoed. Torek, the reptilian warlord, approached. The glow of his golden eyes dimmer now, contemplative. He regarded the wall in silence before speaking. "They will test you," Tor said, his voice gravelly yet calm. "This victory does not end the doubt, it begins your true trial." Ryu nodded, his gaze unmoving from the wall. "I didn't come here for their approval. I came to remind them what humanity is capable of." Torek huffed, a sound almost like laughter. "You already have. But the galaxy forgets quickly. There will be others, stronger, crueler." He paused, narrowing his gaze. "You fought not just for Earth but for something more, didn't you?" Ryu's jaw tightened, his mind drifting, images of Earth, forgotten on the galactic stage, mocked as weak, backward, irrelevant. A species of thinkers, dreamers, not conquerors. "Until now. I fought to redefine us," Ryu replied. Quietly. "They will remember our strength, not for destruction but for mastery." The reptilian studied him for a long moment, then offered a slow, deliberate nod. "Then perhaps you were more than a warrior. Perhaps you are a symbol." With that, Tor turned and left, his massive form fading into the shadows of the hall. Broadcast across the galaxy later that cycle, the official galactic networks displayed a final image of Ryu standing alone at the center of the arena, head unbowed, his black armor bearing the marks of battle. A single line accompanied the broadcast in hundreds of languages: "Earth stands among legends." And across distant worlds, those who had once scorned humanity watched, some with curiosity, some with unease, but none without a newfound respect. Humanity had risen, and the galaxy would never underestimate them again.